Just as a reminder, all of this is considered educational content only and should not be construed for financial advice. Hey y'all, my name is Brian Krogsgaard from Ledger Status, and today I want to do a quick market update. We're going to talk about Bitcoin and altcoins. As you can see, we are on our fourth down day in a row on Bitcoin. This is the third day in a row where we've seen significant downward momentum going, and really I think you can safely say that we've invalidated the head and shoulders that everyone's been pointing at, and we are back below 10,000. I shared a tweet I think a week or so ago that said that people in crypto Twitter are bullish above 10,000 and bearish below 10,000, and I swear it seems like it always plays out that way. There is a really impressive order block around 10,000 that tends to be a swing zone for Bitcoin, so it does make sense a bit. However, it's funny how the mentality changes and the mood changes on crypto Twitter around that number. In terms of support, we see a good bit of support really between all the way down to like 8,200 up to 9,200 at this point, because we've really broached that. This whole block we can kind of find some areas of support within, and then if you look over here where we had really resistance turned support and then led into these big 4 days or so, over here around 8,400, and that co-aligns with this area over here that took a while to breach, and then we had a big run up to 10,000 back in late November. So in terms of Bitcoin, that's kind of what I'm looking at. Also in a log sense, we had 1, 2, and 3 attempts at that downward trend. This one here was more on the linear trend, failure of that. So that's been interesting to watch, the linear versus the log trend. You could also look at today as 1, 2, 3, and then a breach of the linear trend on number 4 and a failure at horizontal support, and then now a breach back below the linear trend. We talked a little bit about that on the podcast in terms of linear versus log. Personally, I really like to use log. Retail traders may be using linear more often. I think, you can use whatever. You can adjust your analysis based on both scenarios, especially when we're analyzing trends like this, or you could just look at these horizontal levels and, in the run down before we really broke down to new lows, we created a lot of wicks in this zone, but we did go down into this zone a good bit, and then we've traveled down and up through this region a good bit as well. So personally, I've got this line here around 9,100, and I think that 8,800 to kind of 8,800 zone around here and above is all kind of the same to me. I'd really like to stop where we're at right now at 9,200. By the time this video gets even uploaded, we'll know the answer to that, I guess. And we'll see if we can rebound back up, or if we're gonna chop around, or what the situation is going to be. I remain bullish on the year for Bitcoin. I shared in the podcast that's about to go out another chart where I highlight what consolidation might look like and how we approach another trend. Let's see if I can pull that up. In the longer term, I do think it's very possible that we actually don't see new highs until later in the year, which, I don't love to say, but it's possible. Looks like I don't have that up right now. I do think I shared it on Twitter. But basically it's a scenario where if you go back to last March or so and you draw a diagonal here, we've had several touch points on this trend line. So it's possible, in my opinion, that we consolidate, kind of fill out this triangle, if you will. Again, this line is not perfect the way I have it drawn right now, since I'm drawing it as I go. But, I think it's possible to look at this as a possible diagonal support, and then align that with the diagonal downward trend. And one of these is going to have to give. So maybe that's around 8,700 in mid-April. So maybe we zoom around in this region. I do think if we reach a certain point, say around here, that you'll see a lot of people start calling for new lows. And, it's certainly possible. There does come a point where I'm personally more concerned about new lows. Like, I don't think we're going to have an equal level double bottom. I really don't think there's great historical precedent for that with Bitcoin, to have an equal lows double bottom. Usually you're going to make a higher low or a lower low on those scenarios. So if we make lower lows, we could end up down here at the 5K range. If we make a higher low up here, maybe like 7,700. I've seen some people talk about that as a possible level. There is support there. Upwards of 8,000, 8,800, kind of maybe at the high level. In terms of the longer term outlook, it does seem less likely to me that we're going to make new highs in an immediate term. Like, I don't think we're going to be testing 20,000 before summer. Based on the triangle that I just drew, that leads us into early September. And I think that's reasonable. Fundamentally, I think Bitcoin is super bullish right now. There's a lot of great activity going on. If we look at the acquisition of Poloniex and Circle, backed by Goldman Sachs, getting involved even more heavily in terms of retail crypto. If we look at Robinhood, some of the stuff going on with that. And in addition to that those types of things being bullish for Bitcoin, that's in addition to technological bullishness with the Lightning Network advancements and whatnot. That's also fundamentally fairly bullish for some alts, but maybe not all alts. I've had some thoughts about this recently. I talked to Beast Lorian about that on the podcast that is going out. And it goes around my ideas with the possibility of mass delisting of some altcoins. So I don't know that the future of alts is going to look like the past of alts. There's uncertainty on several fronts with altcoins right now. One is the potential delisting of what may be securities. The other is just that somebody like Circle, who has a bit license and they're FDIC insured and all this stuff, they just may not want to risk the exchange with this enormous number of altcoins that Poloniex supports. So I think what they choose to delist, and that could lead us into kind of a new era for alts. And that's in addition to all these securities questions that we're seeing. We know that the SEC, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, has sent out filings to something like 80 ICOs to basically find out, and we're going to find out whether they're securities. The SEC commissioner has stated in the past that he thinks most ICOs are securities. That'll probably affect the ICO market, maybe see some delays in the ICO market. And we'll just have to see how that plays out. But I do think it's possible to see drastic shakeups with altcoins. And, we have to decide for ourselves where we're willing to have risk tolerance. In terms of alt cycles, I want to use an example. And this is by no means me recommending to buy or sell this alt. I don't even have a position in it. I just think it's worth looking at and interesting to look at. And that is Waves. So Waves is a really worthwhile example, I think, because, fundamentally this is a solid coin. It's another platform. It had a humongous 2017 increase in value relative to Bitcoin, and then like most alts, it bled down, and then it recovered between November and December to have what looks like, relative to Bitcoin, a pretty small season. Some people call these test pumps in terms of a new alt season. And there's been this debate of, are we going to have an alt season soon? Is it going to be March? Is it going to be April? Or did we already have one? Was January all we get? December and January, was this all we get? And the argument for that being all we get, I think, really plays out best on the dollar chart. And if you look on a dollar chart like waves, and this is just an example, and it's similar to a lot of others, the dollar rise in value is clear. There was a breakout from the prior all-time high. There was a really nice increase, and then we've basically fully retraced on those dollar values, and those coincided with the Bitcoin dump. What I want to show you, though, is what that dollar increase looks like if you're on a linear chart. It is much more severe on the linear chart. You can just see how big those dollar increases were for alts relative to the log chart. On log, this looks like a big increase, but not bigger than this one. But if you look at it in linear, actually the pump that we just had was way, way bigger than the prior one. And when I look at this on a linear perspective, and I know we often don't talk about the increased value of altcoins relative to the dollar, but this is worth considering. The fact that an altcoin went from $6 to $18, it tripled in value, and then it fully retraced that dollar value. And we may need to see some accumulation here on these, and depending on what the price of Bitcoin is doing at the same time, that may mean a continued bleed out. So if these don't rise in value with Bitcoin, they could continue to lose value versus Bitcoin. And that's the case for seeing continued alts downward momentum over the coming weeks, months, whatever we want to call it. If Bitcoin's going slightly up and altcoins are going sideways, then we would see this bleed out, and it would look very much like classical accumulation periods. Now, Waves is a little bit of a newer coin, so it's harder to look at. I do want to highlight that I'm not, picking one and using it to fit my bias. If you look at something like Strat, it's very similar. You look at the Bitcoin run, this one was massive, this one looks much smaller. But if you show it, excuse my silly drawings, if you show it in USD, in log, it looks similar, but when you put it in linear, the January pump was even bigger. And what we're seeing here is just an effect where Bitcoin's price was so high, up at 19,000, 20,000, that these altcoin pumps, even as Bitcoin was receding to 12, 13, 14,000, is kind of when all of these pumps happened. It was a bigger pump than it looks like on the Bitcoin chart. And now that we're back down here, to me, it doesn't seem like the most likely scenario that we're going to just run straight to new highs and have these massive pumps all over again. Again, excuse this ridiculous drawings that I put on here. I don't know what I was doing, having some fun. So it seems to me a little unlikely that our direct response is just going to be, up again. And even drawing a pretty big line like that, that goes into May. But that doesn't seem to me like the most likely scenario for the dollar value. I think potentially we'll see some smaller recoveries. Like, you don't just go down or up all at once, or you shouldn't. So, we may see some variations here where we go a little down, a little up, a little down, a little up, and see slower trends, which gives us opportunities to trade. But we shouldn't expect necessarily just this one big momentous alt cycle. We may need to be looking for the 10, 20, 30% gains, not the 200, 400, 1,000% gains. And that's, that can be a different strategy, a different way to approach alts trading. It doesn't mean that you can't trade alts. It doesn't mean that you have to be 100% Bitcoin. It just means that you might need to limit your expectations. That's kind of where I lean in terms of what I think is going to happen. All of this is, of course, dependent on Bitcoin. Like I said, I'm still bullish on Bitcoin, even though that means that I don't necessarily think that we're going to, breach new highs and go to new heights super quickly. If that takes until late summer, that's what it takes. That's okay. There's the other option that we have this long, protracted downward period. The parabola is broken, so now we have to have a full bear market. It's going to take a long time, that kind of thing. I really think if we go to 3,000 and 4,000, that it's not going to be a super slow process. I think if we make new lows, I think we'll make those new lows pretty quickly, so that we would see, potential really speedy rundown. Let's say if it happens now, I don't think that's what we're going to do. Then I think that could happen quite quickly, and then do a slower process, or who knows what. It's hard to say with precision. You got to use those lower time frames to inform your higher time frame decisions in terms of velocity. I still fundamentally, I just don't see this being the scenario that plays out. I'd like to see this linear trend line hold. This will, of course, affect everything else in the market because Bitcoin is king. But in terms of the alt positions that I choose to play, I am going to be careful in the consideration of the coins that I want to be in, because I want to consider that they may be delisted by Poloniex, which could trigger dumps across all exchanges. I want to consider that the Securities and Exchange Commission may come down with stricter regulations that will affect ICOs, both current and previous ICOs, and all of that plays into this market. So I'm bullish on crypto, but I do think there's uncertainty in the air in terms of when we should expect something good to happen in terms of increases in dollar and Bitcoin value for altcoins, and increases in the dollar value of Bitcoin itself. So we'll have to see how it plays out. In the meantime, I'm looking at this zone, this potential triangle scenario, to see what way that goes. And that'll hopefully inform the way we make decisions going from there. That resolves by mid-April, so we have no more than a month or so to figure that out, and I look forward to watching it with you. So here's to a bullish resolve on that situation. I will finish by saying I do think the health of the altcoin market also depends on the health of the Bitcoin market. So if Bitcoin does have a full bear market, I think the dollar values of altcoins will really tank well below what we see now. So I don't want that to happen. So I do hope that we see a bullish continuation for Bitcoin, even though we're seeing some short-term pain now. And with that, we will catch you next time. Have a good one.